You know, there are nights when the silence in your room feels louder than any thunderstorm. You stare at the ceiling, your chest tight, and something inside you whispers, "Why is life doing this to me?" It's a quiet question, but it carries the weight of everything you've tried to hold together. You've worked hard. You believed. You hoped. Yet somehow, reality keeps pushing you backward like a cold wind against your chest, stealing your breath 1 inch at a time. Jobs slip out of your hands. Relationships, once warm, turn distant and brittle. Dreams you thought were just around the corner begin to drift like a mirage you can never quite reach. In those moments, the ego trembles. It begs for explanations, demands someone to blame, and when answers don't come fast enough, it whispers that you're cursed, punished, forgotten. But there's something deeper happening beneath that fear. Something ancient, something sacred. The souls chosen for a life of depth are rarely handed comfort. They are sculpted through pressure, shaped through brokenness, and awakened through the cracks. What feels like punishment is often a rite of passage. If you've ever watched a seed sprout, you know the first thing it must do is crack open. Its shell must split. Its structure must fail. From the outside, it looks like destruction. But from the inside, it's simply growth. The same is true for you. When everything familiar begins to fall apart, it's not because you are unworthy. It's because you've outgrown the container that once held you. Life can feel merciless in these transitions. You try to hold on to old rhythms, old identities, old relationships, the same way someone clings to a rope slipping from their hands. But just like a river never apologizes for changing its current, the universe never apologizes for guiding you away from what no longer resonates with who you're becoming. Sometimes, we don't let go until we're forced to. Jobs become unbearable, so we stop hiding behind them. Relationships crumble, so we stop shrinking ourselves to fit inside them. Dreams disappear, so we can question whether they were really our dreams at all. It's strange how we rarely listen to whispers, so the universe raises its voice through discomfort. Pain has always been one of its most honest languages. And yet, pain also shakes loose. The excess, those pieces of identity built from fear, approval, or survival. When life pulls them away, something inside finally exhales. You start to discover who you are without applause, without a script, without another person's permission. It can feel like standing alone in a dark room, blindfolded. But in that darkness, the senses sharpen. You begin to hear your own breath again, the kind of breath you forgot you had. There's a reason mystics call this the dark night of the soul. It's not a punishment, it's a purification. Imagine a butterfly's transformation. Inside the cocoon, the caterpillar doesn't just grow wings, its entire body dissolves into a cellular soup. Total breakdown. Total surrender. Only then can the blueprint of flight awaken. Your breakdowns may feel violent. They may stretch you until you think you'll snap. But within them are imaginal cells, the hidden potential of who you were destined to become. Of course, the ego hates this. It fights. It clings. It creates urgency, panic, drama. It wants to maintain the life it knows because to the ego, the unknown is death. But consciousness whispers from beneath the fear trust. In quantum physics, observation changes reality. When your awareness expands, when you shift from fear to faith, your external world begins to match the vibration inside you. Not instantly, not easily, but undeniably. Still, transformation rarely comes dressed in comfort. Think of forest fires. From a distance, they look tragic. Trees collapsing, ground scorched, smoke filling the sky. But certain seeds only open in intense heat. Without the fire, their future never germinates. Your life works the same way. Some potentials can only awaken under pressure. Some strengths can only be forged in emotional heat. Some clarity can only appear after burning away everything false. It's easy to believe you're losing everything. But what if you're simply losing what was never meant to stay? Doors don't close because you're unworthy. They close because the hallway ahead is too narrow for who you're becoming. This is the quiet geometry of growth. The universe removes what would block your wings. And then, a new emptiness appears. It can feel terrifying, like standing in a home with stripped walls and bare floors. But emptiness is not absence. In quantum fields, empty space is the birthplace of infinite potential. Life cannot pour new wine into a cup overflowing with old beliefs. So the universe empties you. Slowly, relentlessly, lovingly. When you stop resisting, when you allow, when you soften, even just a little, you begin to feel something shift. Your chest unclench. Your breath deepens. What used to trigger fear now brings curiosity. You become less concerned with being understood and more interested in understanding. Your presence changes. People notice, even if they can't explain why. You look lighter. Not because your life is easier, but because you're no longer carrying it the same way. You stop swimming upstream, trying to control the currents of life. Instead, you float. Trusting the direction of the river, you begin to recognize the subtle difference between force and flow. Force exhausts. Flow aligns. It's like the difference between dragging a boat across land and setting it on water. Once you allow yourself to float, movement becomes effortless. The more you relax into this unfolding, the more you see that nothing was ever random. Every heartbreak sculpted your compassion. Every loss thickened your roots. Every disappointment redirected you to truer soil. And slowly, as dawn follows night, you feel wings stirring where there was once only heaviness. In these moments, you don't rise back into who you were. You rise into who you've always been. Through your cracks, light begins to leak out, the kind of light that doesn't blind, but guides. People are drawn to your calm, not because you are untouchable, but because you've been touched deeply and survived with softness intact. You speak less for attention and more from authenticity. Your scars become scripture. Your story becomes medicine. The ego thinks healing means returning to what was present, but the soul knows healing means becoming someone new. And so, when life bends you, when it stretches you beyond comfort, understand this. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. Preparation hurts because growth requires discomfort. Roots don't grow in sunlight. They push downward through darkness. Searching, expanding, anchoring. If you're in that darkness right now, let your breath be your companion. Lay down the urge to fix everything at once. You were never meant to carry the universe on your shoulders. Surrender does not mean giving up. It means giving in to the deeper intelligence that shaped your heartbeat before you ever learned to fear. One day, you'll look back at this chapter and smile softly, not because it was easy, but because it carved out space where love, wisdom, and truth could finally live. And you'll realize life never broke you. It broke what was built on illusions. What remains, the quiet, steady presence inside your chest, is unbreakable. So rest, allow, soften. Your wings are forming in ways you cannot see. And soon, the life that once felt impossible will feel like the only one ever meant for you. 1. The dissolution of the ego. You might not notice it at first. It happens quietly. Like the slow fading of a once vibrant color, the ego never gets up and walks out the door on its own. It clings. It clutches. It wraps itself around titles, achievements, relationships, and the small trophies the world taught you to chase. It whispers, "As long as I have these things, I exist. As long as someone sees me, I matter." And because its voice often sounds like your own, you believe it. Then life begins to shift, not cruelly, but precisely. one by one, the roles you used to play provider, savior, partner, success stories start slipping through your fingers. You fight to hold them, but the tighter you grip, the more they cut into you, and in those moments when they finally tear away, you feel naked in a way that clothing can't fix. That nakedness is terrifying. The ego panics. It tells you that without your job, you're worthless. Without that relationship, you're unlovable. Without praise, you're invisible. It begs you to rebuild the identity you spent years perfecting, but something inside resists. Not out of laziness, but wisdom, because deep within, a quieter awareness begins to stir. When the scaffolding of your identity falls, what rises is not emptiness, it's truth. This truth does not shout. It doesn't need to. It sits in the hollow space of what you lost. Like a gentle breath, filling a collapsed lung, you start to sense that you are not the car you drive, the house you live in, the name on your badge, or the story you've told for decades. You are something far more spacious. But the ego doesn't surrender gracefully. It rebels. It shakes you with anxiety. It fills you with doubt. It pushes you toward people who soothe the old version of you. It pulls you back into patterns that feel safe, even if they've been hurting you for years. The ego is terrified of death, and the strange thing is, it can die even while you're still alive. That's why it fights. So life applies pressure not as punishment, but as invitation. It places you in seasons where your usual patterns no longer work, relationships no longer fit, and old dreams feel strangely foreign. You look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. The voice that once demanded to be admired is suddenly quiet, not out of defeat, but exhaustion. This exhaustion is sacred. When you're too tired to perform, you can finally be real. Sometimes this dissolution looks like burnout, sometimes heartbreak, sometimes silence so profound you can hear the fears you spent years drowning out. In these moments, you might believe something is wrong with you, but often, what's wrong is simply what's false. Think of a snake shedding its skin. If it tries to keep the old layers, they become heavy, suffocating, and eventually lethal. The shedding looks violent, uncomfortable, awkward, yet it's the most natural process in the world. The ego is your old skin. Not evil, just too tight now. As the outer layers peel away, the mind tries to understand what's happening. It asks, who am I without these things? But the mind can't answer. Because the answer doesn't live in language. It lives in awareness. Reality begins to reveal that identity was never meant to be fixed. Identity is fluid like water, finding new shapes as the container changes. And then something astonishing happens. Silence becomes less frightening. You start noticing breath. You start feeling space inside your chest. You start sensing the subtle current of life that never depended on accomplishments or approval. It's like watching a fog lift. After years of believing the fog was the landscape, people around you might be confused. They liked the version of you that fit their expectations. They may say you're distant, changed, unfamiliar. And they're right. Because when the ego fades, you no longer move to impress or to manage perception. You move to experience presence, the simple kind, the kind that doesn't chase applause. In this space, suffering begins to reveal its purpose. Suffering cleans the window between you and your true self. It scrapes away the residue of who you thought you needed to be. It shows you the emptiness of wearing masks. And when the mask drops, the eyes behind it finally breathe. There's a tenderness in this process. You feel fragile, yet somehow more grounded. Things that used to upset you lose their sting. Drama becomes noise. Possessions lose their shine. Attention feels hollow. The ego's currency comparison, competition, recognition no longer buys anything real. You begin valuing silence over noise, depth over speed, authenticity over reputation. This shift cannot be forced, like fruit ripening on a branch. It happens when conditions are right. The storms that shook you weren't designed to break your roots. They were meant to deepen them. Ego's voice gets quieter not because you defeated it, but because you outgrew the frequency it speaks from. You begin seeing others differently too. You notice their pain beneath defensiveness, their fear beneath anger, their longing beneath ambition. Judgment gives way to compassion, because once you've watched your own identity crumble, you stop pretending anyone's facade is the full story. And in this transformation, a strange paradox appears. The less you cling to being somebody, the more you feel connected to everything, without ego's barrier. Presence becomes porous. You feel belonging without needing to belong to something. You feel love without needing to possess anything. You become spacious enough to hold contradictions quietly. When the ego dissolves, you no longer walk into rooms wondering who will notice you. You walk in wondering what you can notice. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak to understand. You don't rush to fill silence. Silence fills you. And gradually, beautifully, you discover that what remains after ego dissolves is something incorruptible. A quiet awareness that never depended on achievement to feel worthy. A steady warmth that doesn't shrink in solitude. A presence that doesn't require performance. The world may still swirl with chaos, but inside, the winds slow. You stop running away from yourself. You stop negotiating your value. You stop bargaining with your worth. This is how the soul emerges, not with fireworks, but with a soft clarity, not with applause, but with breath. It's the moment you realize you are not here to prove anything. You are here to remember something. And once you remember, you will wonder how you ever forgot. The dissolution of the ego is not the end of you. It is the end of pretending. It is the slow, gentle, unmasking of the presence you carried all along. The light behind the roles, the voice beneath the narratives, the pulse beneath the noise. When the ego bows, the soul steps forward, quietly, calmly, unmistakably. And that, finally, is when life begins. 2. Pain reshapes the brain. There's a strange moment in suffering when you realize your mind doesn't respond the way it used to. It's subtle at first, like a faint shift in the direction of the wind. You notice thoughts you once believed, with absolute certainty, begin to soften. Reactions that once leapt from you like sparks from dry wood now hesitate. Awareness, once narrow as a keyhole, begins to widen, and you wonder what is happening to me. Pain, though unwelcome, has always been one of life's most effective sculptors. It carves new landscapes within the nervous system, rewiring pathways that once served survival but now stand in the way of growth. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself, to form new connections, to strengthen unfamiliar circuits while dissolving outdated ones. And while that may sound clinical, its implications are deeply human. When you go through trauma loss, heartbreak, failure, betrayal, your brain is forced to adapt. It can no longer rely on the old shortcuts of complacency. It must become flexible, alert, intuitive. You're pushed into emotional territories you never asked to explore. But as painful experiences repeat, something beneath the surface begins to reshape. Imagine a river carving its way through rock. Every flood, every storm deepens the grooves. The river learns to flow around obstacles, to curve gracefully where the straight path once existed. Your neural pathways work the same way. The more you're forced to navigate difficulty, the more your brain learns to bend instead of break. In the early stages, this process feels like chaos. Sleep is fragile, thoughts are loud. The nervous system fires alarms at the slightest trigger. But in time, your brain begins to understand that not every shadow is a beast. Not every silence means abandonment. Not every ending means failure. Slowly, the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear, loses its dominance, and the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for reasoning, empathy, reflection, begins to strengthen. You might not feel it happening, but you'll see the signs. You notice you can sit with discomfort a little longer than before. You breathe through panic without running. You listen instead of reacting. You pause instead of exploding. These are not accidents. They are neural rewiring in motion. Pain stretches your capacity for emotional nuance. You become sensitive not in the fragile way, but in the way a violin string is sensitive, tuned for resonance. You hear subtleties in other people's voices, not just what they say, but what they hide. You notice when someone's smile trembles under the weight of their exhaustion, when their jokes are tinged with loneliness, when their silence begs for understanding, not interrogation. You start to see the world through a widened lens. Suffering becomes not just something you endured, but something that taught you to perceive differently. And there's another thing pain does: it slows you down. In a world obsessed with speed, trauma forces a pause. It strips away the illusion that constant motion means progress. This stillness, though uncomfortable, gives your brain space to rewire. New neurons reach for each other like fingertips in the dark, forming bridges where gaps once existed. As these connections strengthen, so does your emotional intelligence. You learn that strength isn't rigidity, it's adaptability. You learn that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the willingness to feel it. You learn that wisdom isn't found in answers, it's found in awareness. Consider a tree that survives a heavy storm. Its trunk might twist, its branches might bend, but in response, its roots die deeper, anchoring it against future winds. The brain does the same. Every emotional storm deepens your inner roots, making you harder to uproot next time. Of course, not every change feels pleasant. Some shifts feel like losing pieces of yourself. Friends might say you're different, and they're right. Trauma forces the brain to retire patterns that no longer serve you. The old version of you, the one who tolerated too much, silenced too often, or trusted too easily, was wired for survival, not self-respect. When those circuits dissolve, it can feel like losing identity. But what you're losing is the habit of shrinking. The brain is learning new boundaries, new responses, new language. Where once there was panic, now there is discernment. Where once there was self-blame, now there is curiosity. Where once there was avoidance, now there is presence. At first, this growth feels awkward, like learning to walk again. You stumble through conversations, unsure how to express needs you once buried. You feel overwhelmed by empathy you used to numb. But slowly, these neural pathways strengthen. Suddenly, honesty feels easier than silence. Self-care feels natural instead of selfish. Rest becomes restorative instead of guilty. There's also something else, perhaps the most beautiful effect trauma has on the brain: integration. When pain is processed rather than suppressed, the hemispheres of the brain synchronize. Logic and emotion begin to dance together. The left side, responsible for language and analysis, learns to translate the wordless wounds stored in the right, the side that holds memory. Intuition, imagery. This integration allows you to tell your story with compassion, rather than relive it with shame. And while the world might praise efficiency, trauma teaches depth. You become someone who understands that tears are not weakness, they are neurological release. That silence is not emptiness, it is nervous system repair. That solitude is not exile, it is reconnection. You begin to realize that healing isn't a straight line. Neural pathways don't remodel overnight. They strengthen with repetition, compassion, and rest. Some days, you'll feel like you're back where you started. But if you look closely, you'll notice that the spiral is rising, not looping. You're returning to the same themes with a wiser nervous system. People may ask how you have changed so much. They'll see softness where you once had armor, kindness where you once had walls, boundaries where you once had people-pleasing. And they'll think it happened because time passed. But you'll know the truth. It happened because your brain rebuilt itself from the inside out. Your capacity to hold pain expanded your capacity to hold love. Your sensitivity became discernment. Your vulnerability became your compass. The ancient mystics said, "The heart has its own intelligence." Today, modern science is catching up. The electromagnetic field around the heart communicates with the brain, influencing emotion, memory, and perception. When trauma cracks the surface, the heart's messages grow louder. Your intuition sharpens not as magic, but as neural attunement. That's why, after suffering, you feel people more than you debate them. You sense truth beneath words. You trust the subtle, you lean into the quiet. There's a softness that grows in the aftermath of pain. Not weakness, softness. The kind you see in a weathered stone smoothed by years of river flow. It still has weight. It still has substance. But its edges no longer cut. And as your brain continues to reshape, you discover something astounding. The very circuits that once fired in fear now fire in empathy. The pathways, wired for survival, transform into pathways wired for connection. The parts of your brain that once anticipated threat learn to anticipate possibility. You become more fully human. And that is the secret gift of trauma. It does not return you to who you were. It invites you into who you could become. Neuroplasticity is not just a scientific term. It is a promise, a reminder that nothing inside you is fixed, that you can grow new ways of thinking, new ways of loving, new ways of living. The brain is always listening to the story you tell yourself. And if you choose compassion not as an idea, but as practice, your neurons will bend toward peace, the way plants bend toward sunlight. One day, you'll wake up and realize you respond differently. You breathe deeper, speak softer, choose wiser. The triggers that once set your nervous system on fire now flicker out gently. You self-soothe with presence instead of distraction. You listen to your body as if it were a beloved child learning to walk. And in that quiet shift, you'll understand something profound. Healing didn't erase your scars. It rewrote the wiring beneath them. The pain that once fractured you became the forge that strengthened your mind. The neural pathways you rebuilt through suffering are now the very highways of your resilience. When the brain rewires, the soul reawakens. And from that moment forward, you don't just survive life. You participate in it with depth, with clarity, with a tenderness stronger than any armor you ever wore. 3. Soul retrieval, the return of the forgotten self. There comes a point in suffering when you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin whispering, "What is this trying to show me?" It's a subtle shift, but everything changes there. Because pain, in its strange and merciful way, has always been less of a punishment and more of a summons. It calls something ancient out of hiding something you misplaced, while trying so hard to be who the world told you to be. When life cracks you open, pieces of yourself you once abandoned begin to stir. Your intuition, the quiet voice you silenced to fit into noisy rooms, starts speaking again. Your creativity, once buried beneath responsibility and expectation, begins to flutter like a bird that forgot it had wings. And your true voice, the one you softened to avoid judgment, rises with a tremble that eventually becomes steadiness. Pain does not take from you without offering something in exchange. It returns fragments you didn't know you'd lost. In psychology, we talk about dissociation, parts of the self splitting off to protect the core. But long before therapy had vocabulary, shamans and healers spoke of soul fragments, pieces of essence that hide away during trauma to avoid damage. Their return is called soul retrieval, not a mystical event, but a psychological and emotional homecoming. You may feel it when you're alone one night, staring at the ceiling, and suddenly remember a younger version of yourself, the one who dreamed freely, who trusted instinctively, who rested easily in their own presence. That memory isn't nostalgia, it's invitation. Trauma criatis cracks. Yes, but through those cracks, forgotten signals slip back in. At some point in your life, in society may have told you to grow up, get serious, be practical, dim down. You complied, because acceptance felt like survival. One by one, you silenced the parts of you that were inconvenient, your curiosity, your softness, your imagination. You traded authenticity for approval, truth for belonging, and slowly, without even noticing, you lost languages only your soul spoke. When life shatters your certainties, those parts sense open doors. They return timidly at first, like children peeking from behind a curtain, testing whether you're finally safe enough to hold them. And you are, but only because you cracked. The truth no one tells you is that identity built only on strength becomes rigid. Identity grown through wounds becomes spacious. There's room now for parts that once felt unwelcome. Intuition returns first. It whispers in the quiet spaces between your racing thoughts. It nudges you away from rooms where your nervous system tightens. It points toward conversations that feel nourishing instead of demanding. After trauma, your intuition isn't dramatic. It's precise. It begins drawing boundary lines where you once handed out keys. Creativity comes next. Not the artistic performance you chased for validation, but the simple joy of making anything at all. You find yourself drawn to colors, words, melodies, not because you're trying to impress the world, but because they help you remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Creativity is the soul's laughter. Trauma may silence it for a while, but recovery teaches it new rhythms. And then, perhaps the hardest part, the real voice returns. The voice you swallowed to keep peace. The voice you lowered not to be too much. The voice you ignored out of fear of abandonment. It rises through your cracked ribcage, like a vine pushing through concrete. It trembles. It shakes. But it is unstoppable. You begin telling your truth, not aggressively, but with grounded softness. You say no without apology. You say yes without guilt. You speak less, but each word carries weight. As these parts return, you might feel disoriented. You're meeting yourself again, someone familiar, yet newly formed. Happiness feels foreign at first. So does rest. So does honesty. Healing is not the return to who you were before the pain. It is the emergence of who you became because of it. There's another layer to this process: memory. Pain awakens memory, not of events, but of essence. You remember the person you promised yourself you'd become. You remember passions abandoned for practicality. You remember what peace felt like before survival became your job. These memories are not ghosts. They're coordinates. Sometimes you'll feel pulled toward things you can't explain: books, places, certain people, sudden hobbies. That pull is the soul retrieving its scattered pages. It is a magnetic resonance between who you were and who you might become. Some nights, a wave of sadness may wash over you. But notice this sadness feels cleaner than before. It doesn't drown you. It cleanses you. If grief is returning, it's because something within you trusts you enough now to hold it. You start whispering to yourself differently. Instead of "What's wrong with me?" you ask, "What do I need?" Instead of "I'm broken," you say, "I'm unfolding." Instead of "I failed," you breathe, "I learned." Your nervous system begins to believe you. It's also important to understand that some relationships can't follow you into this retrieval. They were built around the version of you who silenced intuition, swallowed creativity, and obeyed fear. As your true parts return, those relationships feel like shoes, 2 sizes, too small. You don't outgrow people with anger. You simply outgrow the version of yourself that required them. And though it hurts, there is grace in that. As these fragments reintegrate, you notice that your heart feels both heavier and lighter, heavier with truth, lighter with relief. You stop trying to be understood. You start trying to be aligned. Presence becomes less about being seen, more about feeling seen by yourself. There's a moment you'll know it when you catch your reflection and recognize your eyes again. Not the eyes of survival, but of belonging. You'll feel tears, not from pain, but from recognition. There you are. I missed you. This is soul retrieval. Not dramatic, not mystical, quiet, slow, unfolding like dawn. Pieces return when you can hold them without flinching. They return because you no longer punish yourself for needing softness. They return because you learn to sit in silence without fearing the echoes. They return because the version of you who needed numbness has retired, and as more fragments reunite, something else emerges: purpose. Not career, not achievement, but purpose, the resonance of being precisely who you are. Without apology, you begin living from the inside out, not the outside in. The world stops being a stage to perform upon and becomes a landscape to inhabit. Your laughter becomes fuller. Your solitude becomes sanctuary. Your relationships become reciprocal. Your creativity becomes devotion. Your intuition becomes compass. This is not recovery from trauma. This is reunion with self. And little by little, you realize that the cracks didn't break you. They opened doors. They let light in. And now, they let pieces out, pieces that dance again. Dream again. Trust again. One day, you'll look back and whisper with soft awe, "The pain did not steal from me. It carried pieces home." And the soul, no longer scattered, breathes in a single voice, again, steady, gentle, whole. 4. The transformation, like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. There is a quiet moment in every transformation when the outer world cannot see what's happening inside. From the outside, it looks like stillness. Nothing moves, nothing grows, nothing changes. But anyone who has ever watched a caterpillar spin its cocoon knows this. The greatest metamorphosis happens in the dark, away from applause, and hidden from every curious eye. Most people admire the butterfly, its wings, its colors, the grace of its flight, but very few ever pause long enough to consider what it had to endure to earn that beauty. The caterpillar doesn't grow wings while crawling under warm sunlight. It must allow itself to be sealed into a cocoon, isolated, vulnerable, suspended between what it was and what it cannot yet imagine becoming. Inside that cocoon, there is no elegance. There is no glamour. There is no comfort. The body of the caterpillar dissolves into a chaotic soup. Its organs break down. Its old identity liquefies. If the creature had human awareness, it might scream, "I'm dying." In many ways, it is not a death of life, but a death of identity. The fabric of what it once was unravels so completely that no structure of the old self remains. Only then can something new begin to assemble. Transformation is not a gentle, decorative process. It's dismantling. It's disorientation. It's the deep fear that nothing will ever feel familiar again. When you go through seasons that feel like cocooning silent nights, lost relationships, dreams melting into puddles, you might think you're failing. You might think you're falling apart. But just like the caterpillar, you are dissolving the old, so the blueprint of the new can activate. Inside you, imaginal cells awaken hidden potentials that were dormant when you were busy surviving. Those cells carry memory, not of who you were, but of who you were meant to be. And like any metamorphosis, you cannot rush this process. Imagine walking up to a cocoon and slicing it open prematurely because you were impatient for the butterfly's wings. You would not be helping. You would be interrupting an ancient intelligence, the creature would emerge weak, unfinished, unable to fly. The struggle inside the cocoon is necessary. It strengthens muscles. It pumps fluid into wings. It prepares the nervous system for a different kind of life. We forget that sometimes we try to pry ourselves open early, force clarity, rush healing, demand answers before we're mature enough to carry them. But the sacred timing of transformation is not governed by the mind. It's governed by the soul. In these cocoon seasons, the world might misinterpret you. It might say you're distant, lazy, withdrawn, but they are looking at what you used to be, not what you're becoming. You can't expect people to understand silence when they are addicted to noise. So you shrink. You fold inward. You sit in darkness. Darkness is not punishment. It's incubation. No butterfly ever regrets its time in the cocoon. It rests there, trusting a process too complex for thought, too ancient for control. And this is where most people turn away, right at the point when everything dissolves. The ego panics, I don't recognize myself. The mind fears everything is changing. But the soul exhales. It knows that wings do not grow on borrowed ground. And your life, at this moment, might feel like soup, messy, unstructured, directionless. But that liquid chaos is fertile. It holds infinite possibility. Inside that sacred confusion, your intuition sharpens. You begin to sense threads, connecting one moment to another. Old interests fall away while new ones quietly bloom. You hear yourself clearly for the first time. You feel your boundaries, firming like muscle memory. You crave authenticity, the way the lost crave home. It's normal to feel alone here. Cocoon seasons are not crowded. Very few will sit with you without rushing you to hatch. But solitude is the soul's workshop. When the world stops distracting you, the quieter truths appear, the ones you ignored while you were busy being busy. This is where you encounter grief not as enemy, but as midwife. It ushers you through endings you never asked for. It hands you the scissors to cut ties with the version of yourself who settled, who chased, who performed. There's mourning here, yes, but on the other side is something softer, relief. Then one morning, not dramatic, not cinematic, you wake up and feel a subtle difference. Your breath expands, your shoulders relax. The inner critique goes silent. You look around and realize you no longer fit into the small spaces you once tried to contort yourself into. The cocoon feels tight now, not painful, just too small. That's when cracks begin to form. You don't rip out in panic. You push gently, steadily. Your wings, though crumpled at first, begin to unfold. Blood rushes into them. Color spreads. The air touches you in places that were once hidden. It's awkward. It's vulnerable. But you stretch anyway. And when you finally step out, you do not crawl. You do not return to the leaves you once devoured. You climb to higher ground, feeling gravity differently, sensing wind as invitation. Then, with a trembling instinct you can't logically justify, you leap. Your first flight is not perfect. Wings wobble. Air rush past. Part of you fears you'll fall, but you don't, because the entire time you were dissolving, you were being prepared. Here's something important. The butterfly cannot remember how it was to crawl. That's why some relationships fade. That's why some dreams change shape. You simply can't go back to a life that was designed for who you used to be. People from your past might say, "You've changed," and you'll smile gently, because they're right. You didn't endure all those nights just to remain the same. The caterpillar's world was the leaf. The butterfly's world is the sky. Transformation demands that you let go of the ground you once worshipped. And while others may still be crawling, it is not your responsibility to explain flight to them. Your responsibility is to fly, and maybe quietly inspire them to look up. When you embrace this shift, you begin noticing those around you differently. Some crawl with urgency, afraid of height. Others cocoon themselves in silent bravery. And some fly, sharing the wind with you. You'll understand all of them, because at some point, you were each. The chaos inside the cocoon was not destruction. It was reorganization. What you thought was the end was simply a rearrangement, a dissolving of what could no longer carry you upward. And so, if your life right now feels like melting, collapsing, liquefying, hold still. Don't judge the mess. Don't rush the emergence. Don't force the shell open. Your wings are forming according to a map older than fear, older than doubt, older than ego. You are not dying. You are rearranging. The world may not see your transformation yet, but that's because the most sacred work happens where no eyes are watching. One day, when you stretch your wings, the world will call it magic, but you will know it was simply the courage to let yourself fall apart, so you could rise into what you were always meant to be. 5. The melting of control. There is a moment in every deep healing when you realize your hands have been clenched for so long that releasing them feels almost unfamiliar. Control was never something you consciously chose. It was something you learned. Perhaps slowly, perhaps suddenly. Life taught you that if you didn't hold everything together, something terrible might happen. So you tightened your grip. You planned. You anticipated. You micromanaged outcomes. You tried to predict every ending before the beginning had time to breathe. At first, it felt like safety. The mind enjoys the illusion that control equals protection. It whispers, if I can just manage every detail, I won't get hurt again. I won't be blindsided. I won't be abandoned. But over time, that same grip begins to choke you. The weight becomes heavy enough that you can't sleep without thinking 5 steps ahead. You can't relax without waiting for the next storm. Even joy becomes suspicious, another possibility to lose. Eventually, you look at your hands and realize you're no longer holding anything real. You're just holding the fear of losing it. Control is a defense mechanism, dressed as strength, but it's really fear wearing armor. Letting go of control isn't passive, it's courageous. It's admitting what you were never taught to say. I cannot force life to be what I want. I can only align myself with what seeks to unfold. Quantum physics speaks of field coherence, the principle that coherent energy flows smoothly, easily, without resistance. When you're clinging too tightly, your energy becomes turbulent, fragmented. Doors that might have opened stay stuck. Relationships suffocate. Opportunities stall. You're not being punished, you're simply blocking the current. Have you ever watched water navigate rocks? It never argues. It never fights. It never tries to dominate the landscape. It flows. It adapts. It allows gravity to guide it into places rigidness could never reach. Water's power comes from softness, not force. And the same is true inside you. Control contracts. Allowing expands. For many of us, control formed during childhood, when adults were unpredictable. Chaos taught us to become the responsible one. When emotions around us were loud, we learned to be quiet. When connection felt unstable, we learned to monitor every environment for danger. Control wasn't selfish, it was survival. But what once protected you becomes a prison when the environment changes. You grow older, you move into relationships, you enter careers, and suddenly that rigid control begins to fracture connection instead of preserving it. People feel suffocated by your worry. Dreams wither under the pressure of perfection. The nervous system burns out from constant vigilance. The body knows when it's time to stop it. There's a moment you'll feel it when you no longer have the energy to control everything. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. The nervous system recognizes that control is exhausting and surrender is nourishment. When surrender begins, you might panic. Letting go feels like stepping into fog without a compass. The ego will resist, shouting, "If I don't force this, nothing will happen." But when you soften just a little, Something quiet begins to reveal itself. Life doesn't collapse without constant supervision. In fact, sometimes things align better without your interference. Relationships become more authentic when you stop rehearsing every sentence. Opportunities feel more natural when you stop chasing them. Breath becomes deeper when you stop trying to control every inhale. The moment you release the tension, you create space for life to respond. Think of a gardener hovering over seeds. If she digs them up every hour to check progress, nothing grows. But if she trusts the soil, trusts the unseen work happening beneath the surface, roots deepen quietly, patiently. Control deeks. Trust roots. And trust does not mean doing nothing. It means doing what you can and allowing life to handle the complexity you cannot see. In quantum terms, coherence happens when your thoughts, emotions, and actions aren't in conflict. When you force outcomes while feeling fear, your energy becomes incoherent. When you soften into alignment, acting from clarity and surrender, the field becomes smooth. You begin to attract rather than chase. You begin to resonate rather than beg. There's a difference between pushing and allowing. Pushing says, I must make this happen. Allowing says, I will prepare. I will show up. And what's meant for me will meet me. That subtle shift changes everything. Because control is rooted in scarcity, surrender is rooted in abundance. When you finally release control, something unexpected happens. The future is no longer a threat. You stop catastrophizing every silence. You stop rehearsing every possibility. You stop trying to manage the behavior of others as if you were responsible for their storms. You begin to trust that you are resilient enough to survive what comes and wise enough to recognize what leaves. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes honest. Control numbs. Intuition. Surrender sharpens it. When you're no longer gripping tightly, you begin to feel when something isn't right rather than calculated. You sense the difference between forcing and flowing, between wanting and needing, between fear and alignment. Your body relaxes. Jaw unclenches. Shoulders lower. Breath finds depth again. Nervous system signals shift from danger to safe. And slow but sure, you feel space inside. You space that was once filled with tension. That space is clarity. And with clarity, you begin to see truth control. Never guaranteed safety. It only guaranteed exhaustion. Relationships healed not by monitoring, but by trusting. Careers opened not by panic, but by presence. Peace arrived not by force, but by surrender. One day, you'll look back at the person who tried to script every detail, and you'll feel compassion. They did the best they could with the tools they had. They were scared. They were tired. They were protecting a heart that had been hurt too many times. But you have new tools now. Breath, presence, boundaries, awareness, alignment. Like a river no longer gushing against its own current, you begin to glide. You find that life responds not to force, but to frequency. When your energy softens, the world becomes softer. When your heart opens, connections deepen. When you stop gripping the wheel so tightly, the road becomes clearer. Surrender isn't losing power. It's learning how to use it properly. Eventually, you realize you never controlled as much as you thought. People left. Jobs changed. Plans shifted. Life moved. And yet you survived it all. You adapted. You grew. You learned. The fact that you are here, breathing, reading, existing, is proof that life continues, even when your plans shatter. When control melts, gratitude becomes effortless. Small moments become profound. You stop living in tomorrow's fear and start noticing today's light. Sunlight on the floor, warmth in a cup of tea, breath, presence. You become anchored in now, and now is where life actually happens. Letting go is not an event. It's a daily practice. Some days you'll surrender effortlessly. Other days you'll grip again. That's okay. Healing is not linear. Each time you choose trust over control, you strengthen coherence in your field. You teach the nervous system that softness is safe. One day, you'll feel a quiet shift. You'll realize you no longer need to force anything. What's meant for you feels like oxygen, always available, never chased. And what isn't meant for you slips away without catastrophe. You will look at your hands once clenched and see them open, relaxed, ready to receive, ready to hold gently, ready to let go again when the time comes. Because life is not something we grip, life is something we flow with. 6. The universe uses pain as a tool of refinement. There's a quiet truth. Most people only discover after life has carved its initials into their bones. Pain is not always punishment. Sometimes, it's precision. Sometimes, it's the universe leaning in gently, whispering to you through the ache. You are capable of more than you realize. It's a message that doesn't come wrapped in comfort. But in contrast, think of a forest. To the untrained eye, a wildfire looks like devastation, chaos, and loss. The flames swallow trees. Dark smoke fills the sky, and the ground is left black and hollow. But if you speak to an ecologist, they'll tell you a different story. Some seeds, ancient, resilient seeds, only crack open when they are exposed to extreme heat. They wait for the fire. Without it, they never sprout. Without destruction, there is no rebirth. Your soul carries seeds like these, potentials that lie dormant not because you're lazy, but because comfort never demanded their awakening. When we are safe, when everything is familiar, we rarely stretch beyond the edges of who we already are. We settle. We shrink into routines. We live smaller than the spirit inside us intended. So life, in its quiet wisdom, sends fire, pressure, loss, disappointment. These are the flames that soften the shell of your potential. They burn away what no longer nourishes. They clear emotional brush old beliefs, outdated identities, habits built from the wrong kind of fear, and they make room for new growth. Pain sharpens you where comfort dulled you. The deeper the wound, the deeper the root can grow. You may not realize it in the middle of the burn. That's when everything feels wrong. You question your worth. You question your path. You question whether you've somehow fallen out of favor with the universe. But if you look closely, you'll notice something. Pain doesn't come randomly. It arrives when you are strongest. It arrives when your inner soil is fertile enough for transformation. It arrives when you have outgrown your shell. Heat is necessary. Pressure is necessary. Not because life is cruel, but because growth without challenge is fragile. Muscles atrophy when unused. Hearts weaken without strain. Values warp without testing. But pain does something remarkable. It humbles you. It strips you of false layers. It teaches you what actually matters. It rearranges your priorities with surgical precision. When everything superficial is burned away, what remains is authentic. We like to talk about the light, the joy, the clarity, but few of us talk about the furnace where that light was forged. We forget that diamonds are created under pressure, steel is tempered by fire, and beautiful pottery is hardened in a kiln. Your soul is no different. It must withstand heat not constantly, but strategically, to reveal its hidden resilience. When pain arrives, the ego panics, but the soul recognizes the pattern. Another layer falling away. You'll notice something else. 2. After painful seasons, your empathy expands. You become gentler with others. You stop judging quickly. You listen deeper. You see beneath the surface. Before suffering, you might have offered advice. After suffering, you offer presence. Pain refines the heart into a compass. It teaches compassion, the way textbooks never could. And there's another gift. Pain offers clarity. When you are hurting, you suddenly see what no longer fits. You become intolerant of what drains you. You stop chasing people whose love is conditional. You realize that silence is better than forced conversation. Your time becomes sacred. Your boundaries become clear. Pain simplifies your life with brutal honesty. Pressure reveals truth. Most people believe they are emotionally strong until life tests them. Most people think they know who they are until pieces fall away. Pain is the mirror that never lies. It shows you the beliefs that limit you, the fears that cage you, the stories you inherited instead of chose. It invites you to ask, who am I really? And the answer that rises from the ashes is always one you couldn't see before. Pain also changes the brain. When you lean into healing, neuroplasticity rewires your reactions. New pathways form resilience, patience, awareness. You stop reacting from survival mode and start responding from presence. Your nervous system becomes less like a triggered alarm and more like an instrument tuned to wisdom. The heat that melted you also shaped you. And then something strange happens. What used to devastate you now merely challenges you. The storm that once drowned you now only soaks your shoes. Pain becomes information, not identity. Pressure becomes refinement, not destruction. You learn to ask, what is this teaching me? Instead of, why me? That shift alone turns suffering into evolution. The universe doesn't waste fire. It targets what you're ready to release. It burns what can't go with you into the next chapter. It's not always kind, but it's always meaningful. And when the flames die down, when the smoke clears, you'll notice tiny sprouts pushing through the charred ground. New boundaries, new confidence, new depth, new intuition. Parts of you that never would have emerged without the burn. The forest is not ruined, it is reborn. It's worth acknowledging that refinement hurts. There's no romantic way to phrase it. Growth tears, change claws, letting go leaves fingerprints. But when you look back, you'll realize the pain was precise. It entered exactly where the shell was too tight, exactly where the armor was outdated, exactly where you needed to be softened, strengthened, or humbled. If you're there now in the fire, in the pressure, breathe. Don't rush. Don't numb. Don't judge. Let the flames burn what was never yours to carry. Let the heat reshape the metal of your character. Because when you rise, and you will, you'll carry something unshakable. A quiet confidence, a deeper compassion, a wisdom that doesn't need to be spoken to be felt. At some point, pain stops being the villain of your story and becomes the mentor. Not because it was pleasant, but because you survived with a fuller heart than the one that entered the flames. And one day, someone will look at you and ask how you became so steady, so kind, so grounded. You'll think of all the fires, all the pressure, all the times you melted into your darkest seasons, and you'll answer softly, I was forged. The universe didn't hurt you to break you. It hurt you to shape you, to reveal the seeds asleep inside your soil, to make you bloom in ways comfort never could. 7. The ego fights back through crisis. There is a strange thing that happens on the spiritual path, and you only recognize it once you've lived through enough storms. The moment you begin to wake up, life often seems to get worse before it gets better. Not because the universe is cruel, but because the ego, terrified of losing its throne, starts to panic. It doesn't vanish quietly. It creates noise, tension, crisis. It drags old fears to the surface. It resurrects patterns you thought you buried. It whispers stories of doom to keep you small. The ego's job is simple: survive. It doesn't care if you're fulfilled. It doesn't care if you're at peace. It cares about being in charge. When awareness begins to dawn, when you start noticing your own reactions, questioning old habits, choosing presence instead of panic, The ego feels threatened, and much like a cornered animal, it lashes out. You'll see it in drama suddenly exploding in your relationships. Old insecurities flare up like wildfire. People who once felt comfortable around your woundedness may become restless when your healing threatens to change the dynamic. Toxic connections intensify, not because you did something wrong, but because you're outgrowing the role you once played within them. The ego often uses chaos as bait. It will whisper, "Go back to what you know. Go back to comfort. Go back to reaction. Go back to being who you were." The familiar, even if painful, feels safer to the ego than the unknown. Awakening threatens the narrative. It built a story where you are the victim, where control is necessary, where fear is justified. To protect itself, the ego manufactures crisis. It magnifies minor inconveniences into emergencies. It fuels arguments to keep you distracted. It pushes you into old addictions just when you start breaking free. Many people mistake this turbulence as a sign they're on the wrong path. But the opposite is true. Crisis often means you're close to breakthrough. The ego only screams when it senses replacement. You can feel this resistance in your body. Sudden tightness, sleepless nights, racing thoughts, the nervous system vibrating as though danger lurks just beyond the horizon. But when you pause and look around, nothing is actually threatening you. The danger is internal, your identity dissolving. That's what the ego fights hardest, the death of false selves. Think of a computer deeply infected with old software. When you install an upgrade, the system glitches before stabilizing. Bugs and errors appear, not because the update failed, but because incompatible code is being purged. Your consciousness works the same way. Awakening destabilizes old programming. Patterns built from fear begin to crumble. Beliefs inherited from culture, family, trauma beliefs that governed your reactions start to feel foreign. But the ego hates ambiguity. It thrives in certainty, so it generates crisis to pull you back into familiar mental territory. Arguments arise not because you suddenly became difficult, but because your energy is no longer playing by the old rules. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will accuse you of changing. They're right. You are changing, and not everyone will celebrate that. Sometimes the ego uses relationships as anchors. Toxic bonds hold you to old stories. The caretaker, the apologizer, the savior, the doormat. The moment you stop performing, those bonds shake. Drama enters like a storm, because the ego hates silence. In silence, you hear yourself clearly. In chaos, the ego's voice becomes louder than intuition. It's wise to notice what appears when you grow. Not everyone resists your evolution from malice. Some are terrified. If you rise, they might have to face their own wounds. Growth is contagious, but so is fear. When you awaken, you disturb the ecosystem of unconsciousness around you. Egoic systems prefer stillness. They depend on you staying asleep. So how do you navigate these crises without collapsing first? Recognize that not every fire needs water. Some flames burn up the old wood that can't support your future. Sometimes the most powerful response is stillness. When you refuse to feed drama, it starves. When you refuse to defend old identities, the ego's power dissolves. You learn to ask, is this crisis real, or is it familiar? The body knows the difference. Real danger tightens the chest briefly, then directs you to safety. Ego danger festers, spirals, catastrophizes. Second, you begin to sense that crisis is not trying to destroy you, it's trying to distract you. Every moment of growth comes with an invitation to return to unconsciousness. The ego throws emotional hooks, resentment, jealousy, comparison, urgency. But if you look closer, you'll see that the hook only hurts when you bite it. Healing is not becoming flawless. Healing is becoming aware enough to see the hook and choose not to bite. Third, understand that awakening is lonely for a while. When you stop participating in unhealthy dynamics, people who use those dynamics to feel safe might try to pull you back into them. They'll accuse you of coldness, but you are not becoming cold. You are becoming clear. And clarity is often misunderstood as distance by those still tangled in emotional fog. As your awareness expands, you begin to see how much crisis was not caused by life, but by the ego's interpretation of life. You were not born anxious. You were taught to brace. You were not born controlling. You learned to fear abandonment. You were not born dramatic. You inherited chaos. When you peel these layers away, things that used to feel like emergencies now feel like weather. Inconvenient, maybe uncomfortable, but temporary and manageable. You stop taking bait. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop gathering proof to defend your existence. The ego's storms lose their thunder when you realize you're not the sky. They're just clouds passing through. And slowly, something incredible happens. Crisis stops arriving so often. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop responding from the version of you that required crisis to feel alive. Drama stops appearing because you no longer vibrate at the frequency that attracts it. Toxic relationships fade because your nervous system no longer tolerates them. Chows becomes boring. Peace becomes magnetic. Your boundaries become intuitive, not rigid walls, but gentle edges. The ego begins to soften not because you defeated it, but because you acknowledged it without believing its every plea. When you no longer fear losing false identities, the ego runs out of weapons. And then that quiet shift, a moment when you recognize the real enemy was never life. It was the story you were telling yourself about life. The ego blamed the universe for every closed door. The awakened mind sees that some doors close because you're not meant to kneel in every doorway. One day soon, you'll notice something truly profound. What once triggered you now teaches you. What once overwhelmed you now informs you. What once panicked you now passes through. The ego has not disappeared. It has transformed into a tool. It alerts, but no longer commands. It whispers, but no longer dictates. And when someone asks why you're so calm now, you'll smile not from arrogance, but understanding. Because once you've seen the ego's tantrum for what it is, a frightened child clinging to old toys, you stop engaging in the same battles. You hold space for your fear like a parent soothing a shaking child. You speak gently to the voice that once bullied you. You say, "I know you're scared, but we're safe now." Awakening doesn't mean the ego loses. It means the soul takes the wheel. Crisis stops being a cage. It becomes a classroom. And you, softened by scars and strengthened by awareness, become someone. Crisis can pass through without breaking because you have learned the secret. The ego never wanted you to know. You were never the storm. You were always the sky. 8. From forcing to letting go. There is a moment on the journey of becoming when you stop moving from fear and begin moving from trust. But no one arrives there gracefully. We arrive with scraped knees, trembling hands, and a heart that has tried to force its way through life long enough to finally ask, what if I don't have to push so hard? Most of us are raised with the belief that effort equals worth. We are taught to strive, to hustle, to grind, to chase. We learn early that if we don't hold everything together, it will fall apart. And so we clutch tightly to outcomes, gripping reality like a rope that might slip from our palms at any second. But a life lived entirely in force becomes heavy. Our chest tightens, our breath shortens. The world becomes a battlefield instead of a classroom. Forcing is the language of fear. When you force, you are trying to manipulate life into giving you what you already fear. It won't. You cling to relationships because you're afraid to be alone. You micromanage your future because uncertainty terrifies you. You choose busyness because silence exposes truths you're not ready to face. The ego believes that if it can control every detail, It can outrun pain. But pain doesn't chase. Pain waits. It waits for the moment you're tired enough to ask real questions. Questions the ego never had the courage to face. What am I afraid will happen if I let go? Whose expectations am I trying to fulfill? Who am I proving myself to in those quiet, honest moments? You begin to see forcing for what it truly is. A nervous system trying to protect you from a world you no longer trust. Letting go is not weakness. It is a different kind of strength. Letting go means loosening your grip on outcomes. It means believing that what's meant for you will not require a war to keep. It means trusting timing, even when it's inconvenient. It means letting relationships evolve naturally, instead of choreographing every step. It means stepping into life without rehearsing every possibility of failure. When you let go, you begin to notice something subtle, but profound. Life breathes back. Physics teaches us that tension restricts flow. When you tighten your hand into a fist, nothing can enter. When you soften it, life can place gifts into your palm. The same is true with the heart. When it's clenched in fear, nothing reaches it. When it's open, it receives. Letting go is not laziness. It's alignment. Imagine swimming against a current. With every stroke, your muscles scream. Your lungs burn. You barely move an inch. But if you turn around, the same current that exhausted you will carry you effortlessly. Nothing changed except direction. Surrender is that turning. There are seasons when we must work. Yes, seasons where effort is noble, but forcing is different. Forcing pushes against your intuition. It ignores inner knowing. It says, I must have this now. Even when your deeper self whispers, not yet. Forcing is urgency without wisdom. Letting go is not quitting. Quitting is rooted in hopelessness. Letting go is rooted in trust. Trust that life is not random. Trust that rejection is redirection. Trust that endings are invitations. Trust that closed doors are protection. As you soften into trust, you begin to see how much energy you wasted trying to control what was never yours. You see how urgently you tried to keep people who were meant to teach you, not stay with you. You see how much suffering was created not by events themselves, but by your resistance to them. Imagine holding a rope tightly while someone pulls the other end. The tighter you grip, the more your palms burn. The pain doesn't come from the pull, it comes from your refusal to release. When you let go, you realize the rope was never holding you. You were holding it. Letting go is a nervous system returning home. The body knows when you surrender. Shoulders lower. Breath deepens. You stop bracing. You sleep softer. The mind stops rehearsing disaster. The heart unclenches. Energy becomes lighter. And slowly, you begin to trust life again. Not because life becomes easier, but because you stop fighting it. There is a quiet intelligence woven into the fabric of existence. Rivers do not argue with rocks. They flow around them. Trees do not beg for sunlight. They grow toward it. Birds do not negotiate with the wind. They ride it. Nature does not force. It responds. The moment you stop fighting life, you begin participating in it. And something else happens. Synchronicity. When you're not frantically grabbing at every possibility, the right opportunities drift toward you. People show up without being chased. Answers arrive without being demanded. Timing aligns without your calendar attempting to dictate it. You realize that struggle is often a sign of misalignment, not misfortune. Letting go requires faith. Yes, but not blind faith. Faith informed by experience. The experience that forcing only ever exhausted you, never fulfilled you. Healing often teaches us that clinging to what hurts feels safer than trusting what heals. Because pain is familiar, peace is foreign. But over time, as awareness expands, you begin to recognize a simple truth. Life cannot deliver what your hands are too full to receive. As you deepen into this truth, your relationship with fear shifts. Instead of reacting, you begin observing. You notice how fear tightens the jaw, shortens breath, narrows vision, and you learn to choose differently. You learn to breathe through the tightness, to expand into the fear, to soften instead of brace. Letting go becomes a practice, not a one-time event. Some days, you will slip back into forcing. You'll grab the rope again. That's okay. The goal is not perfection. It's awareness. Each time you notice yourself forcing, you gently let go again. 1,000 tiny softenings become transformation. There is a moment you'll feel it, when you no longer chase what leaves easily. When you stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding. When you no longer beg life to give you what you've outgrown. In that moment, letting go stops being terrifying and begins being intuitive. You realize that holding on too tightly is what made the journey painful. Your worth is not proven by how hard you fight. Your peace is not found in control. Your joy is not earned through exhaustion. It is allowed through surrender. And slowly, as you practice letting go, you discover a deeper truth. Life was never asking you to grip harder. It was asking you to trust more. It was asking you to meet reality without needing to reshape it. It was asking you to release the illusion that you were ever in control of anything except your response. When you let go, you don't lose, not truly. You simply make space for what aligns. The river will carry you. If you let it, your wings will open. If you stop gripping the branch, your breath will return. If you stop holding it, and life gentle, wise, ancient will unfold before you, not because you demanded it, but because you learned the quiet art of not pushing. One day, you will look back and understand. The moment you let go was the moment everything began to flow. 9. The state of Wu-Wei effortless alignment. There comes a point on the inner journey where exhaustion turns into revelation. After years of pushing, forcing, negotiating with reality, something inside finally whispers, "What if I stop fighting and start listening?" And in that quiet question, the ancient principle of Wu-Wei begins to reveal itself not as a mystical trick, but as a deeply practical truth. Wu-Wei does not mean doing nothing. It means not doing too much. It means no longer using action as a weapon of fear. Imagine standing in a river, determined to run upstream. The current fights you. Your muscles scream. You choke on water. The riverbanks blur. For a while, you call this progress because you are busy. Sweating, struggling, but then something inside breaks not violently, but gently, and you realize all you've ever had to do was turn around. The same force that exhausted you now carries you effortlessly. Nothing changed but direction. That is Wu-Wei action without strain. Movement without war. When you stop forcing outcomes, your energy begins to unclench. You start to act from a place of inspiration rather than panic. Inspiration is quiet, like a small bell inside the chest. Panic is loud, like thunder in the mind. Most of us have spent years mistaking thunder for truth. But inspiration gives you timing. It gives you clarity. It whispers, "Now, here, this." You shift from ambition to alignment. Action taken in panic feels like sprinting in sand heavy. Slow, draining. But action taken from inner clarity feels like riding a bike downhill light. Smooth. Self-fueling. You don't have to convince yourself. You don't have to bargain with motivation. You simply flow. In this state, you stop chasing. You begin attracting. Human beings are magnetic fields in motion. When you radiate urgency, you repel connection. When you radiate insecurity, opportunities slip through your fingers. But when you enter Wu-Wei, your nervous system broadcasts something rare: safety. And people, ideas, resources naturally lean toward what feels safe. There's a reason desperation rarely works. It disrupts coherence. It sends mixed signals into the field around you. You say you want love, but your energy says, I'll abandon myself to get it. You say you want abundance, but your belief says, I lack. You say you want peace, but your body stays clenched. The universe doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your vibration. Wu Wei is coherence, wholeness, congruence. Instead of forcing relationships, you let them reveal their truth. Instead of crushing yourself with productivity, you choose what matters. Instead of trying to control people's perceptions, you simply embody your own. Your life stops being a negotiation. At first, entering Wu Wei feels like doing too little. You may worry, if I stop forcing, nothing will happen. But slowly, you notice something miraculous. The things meant for you begin moving toward you. People call unexpectedly. Ideas arrive without effort. Doors open you didn't knock on. You begin to realize how many breakthroughs you once delayed by gripping too tightly. We are taught that success belongs to the hardest worker, but in reality, true success belongs to the most aligned. Trees do not grow by grinding. They grow by reaching toward the sun, drinking water, trusting seasons. Birds do not rehearse flight. They leap when instinct says leap. The ocean does not strategize its waves. Nature has mastered Wu Wei, and yet it never lacks growth, abundance, or movement. Humans, however, try to override the elegant laws of life by brute force. The ancient sages watched the world and noticed something profound. When you push life, it stiffens. When you relax with life, it softens. Wu Wei teaches you the wisdom of timing. Some seasons are for planting. Some are for pruning. Some are for resting. Some are for growth. So quiet you mistake it for stagnation. But forcing growth in a season of decay creates suffering. As you deepen into this principle, something shifts at the molecular level. Your breath slows. Your shoulders lower. You begin to notice which actions drain you and which actions fuel you. You stop waking up with dread. Instead, you wait for a quiet nudge from within. That nudge becomes your compass, and every time you follow it, life rewards you with synchronicity. And then something curious happens. You become magnetic. People ask how you stay calm when they panic. They ask how opportunities seem to find you. They ask why your presence feels grounding. It's because your nervous system is no longer leaking energy. It's radiating coherence. You've stopped trying to earn everything through struggle. You've remembered effortlessness. This doesn't mean you become passive. When the moment is right, Wu Wei demands action. But that action is swift, clean, confident. It's like a sword cutting through silk, not hacking through rope. When the inner voice says, move, you move. And because you moved with timing, everything aligns. This is where maturity blooms. Maturity is not the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear run the show. It's not the absence of desire. It's the refusal to chase desire through desperation. You begin to trust the deeper intelligence guiding your life, the intelligence that orchestrates tides, seasons, migrations, galaxies. Your ego once believed it had to run the universe. Wu Wei teaches it to cooperate with the universe instead. And in that cooperation, magic becomes ordinary. Relationships grow where pressure once strangled them. Creativity blossoms where perfection once suffocated it. Solutions appear where worry once blocked them. Your mind quiets. Your heart expands. Your life becomes less like wrestling and more like dancing. Then one morning you wake up differently. You don't rush. You don't force. You don't plead. You listen. You trust. You act only when something inside you says, now is true. And in that state, you discover freedom not as a concept, but as a sensation. Freedom feels like space in your chest, like breath that reaches the bottom of your lungs, like smiling for no reason, like walking without urgency. like no longer negotiating your worth. Wu Wei is not about doing nothing. It's about doing no more than what is required, no less than what is true. When you embody this, you radiate a quiet confidence, a presence people feel but can't explain. You become the person who doesn't chase, yet receives. The person who doesn't beg, yet belongs. The person who doesn't control, yet influences. Your life becomes lighter, not because circumstances change, but because you finally stopped lifting what was never yours. One day, you'll look back at all the years you spent forcing and smile, not out of regret, but recognition. Those years were necessary so you could feel the difference, so that when ease arrived, you could trust it, so that when alignment found you, you wouldn't sabotage it, so that when inspiration whispered, you would hear it. And in that quiet wisdom, you will know Wu Wei is not the opposite of effort. It is the evolution of effort, a life where you move like water, soft, but unstoppable, gentle, but undeniable, and everything that is meant for you, drawn by the gravity of your authenticity, arrives right on time. 10. The universe is clearing the path, not blocking it. There comes a season in life when everything you once held tightly begins to loosen. People drift. Familiar places feel foreign. Old habits lose their flavor. What used to comfort now constricts. At first, this feels like loss, sharp, disorienting, unfair. You might look at your life and whisper, "Why is everything slipping away?" But what if nothing is slipping? What if something is being gently removed? The mind sees subtraction. The soul feels preparation. Imagine standing at the edge of a new mountain, ready to climb. Your backpack is full memories, identities, relationships, beliefs. Some of these items once served you, like coats in winter, but as the season changes, carrying those same coats becomes suffocating. The weight slows you. The straps dig into your shoulders. You breathe heavy and assume the mountain is too steep. It is not the mountain that exhausts you. It is the luggage. The universe knows this long before you do. So it begins to lift things from your hands, not to punish you, but to lighten you. Old friendships fade, not because they were bad, but because the version of you they belonged to has ended. Certain environments crumble because your soul has already moved on. Habits that once calmed you now feel hollow because your nervous system no longer vibrates at their frequency. This unraveling is not chaos. It is calibration. When you step into a new vibration, anything that doesn't match begins to fall away. It's not personal. It's energetic honesty. Think of a snake shedding its skin. If the snake clung to the old layer, it would suffocate. What looks like decay is actually growth. The same goes for you. The universe is not blocking you. It is pruning you. It trims what has outlived its season so that your future has room to bloom. But loss hurts, not because what left was perfect, but because endings touch old wounds. We equate departure with rejection. We forget that people leave for 1,000 reasons that have nothing to do with our worth. The door closing is not always a verdict. Sometimes it's a velocity. Something is moving you forward, and the hinges are just doing their job. You may feel abandoned, but perhaps you are being escorted. There's beauty in noticing what falls away when you stop forcing. The friends who only loved your wounds disappear when you heal. The jobs that demanded your silence collapse when you find your voice. The relationships built on your absence crumble when you finally show up for yourself. You're not losing anything real. You're losing the illusion that you needed less than you deserved. When we cling to the old, life becomes heavy. We feel drained in rooms that once felt warm. We shrink to fit conversations that no longer nourish us. We pretend to be who we were, just to be loved by people who never met, who we are becoming. But the body knows when it's time. Your chest tightens. Your intuition whispers. Your breath feels shallow. These sensations are not anxiety. They are invitations. The universe is saying, "This is too small now." And then, As life rearranges itself, your ego panics. It scrambles to rebuild what's breaking. It tries to resurrect connections that died quietly months ago. It negotiates, bargains, pleads, but the soul stands still, hands open, knowing that what leaves willingly was never yours to cage. Letting go hurts less when you realize you are not losing company, you are losing weight. Sometimes, the universe will take away what you are too afraid to release. Not to be cruel, but to be kind. It knows the height of your next chapter. It knows the strength required. It knows what your arms must be free to carry. If doors are closing, trust that the hallway ahead is narrow. You cannot walk into your destiny dragging pieces of a past that was never built to handle who you will become. People get confused by this spiritual truth. Your soul evolves faster than your relationships. When you heal, you become unfamiliar to those who loved your pain. When you grow, you become distant to those who depended on your smallness. When you rise, you become threatening to those who refuse to move. Losing alignment is the price of gaining authenticity. Release is not abandonment. Release is respect. Respect for the path, for timing, for truth. Think of trees in autumn. They let their leaves go without argument. They don't chase them through the wind. They do not glue them back with desperation. They trust the soil. They trust the season. They trust their roots. They know that what is meant to return will return in spring renewed, refreshed, reformed. Letting go is how you honor cycles. There's a moment in every transformation when the old world stops recognizing you. People tell you you've changed. They're right. You did not endure all that grief just to stay the same. Your soul is graduating. Some classmates can't go with you. Relationships collapse not because you failed, but because they outlived the version of you who needed them. Your nervous system upgrades. Your boundaries sharpen. Your self-worth heightens. Your silence deepens. Not everyone will clap, and that's okay. Your growth is not a performance. In the absence that follows, loneliness may sit beside you, like an old companion. But loneliness is not emptiness. It is spaciousness. It is the clearing before new seeds. It is the silence before new music. It is the inhale before new breath. The universe clears what you cannot carry into your becoming. It doesn't always explain. It simply rearranges, and as you stop resisting, you begin to notice what arrives in the empty spaces. Peace, clarity, confidence, alignment. New people appear gentler, deeper, more present. New opportunities emerge, ones that don't exhaust you to deserve them. New dreams, surface ones built from desire, not survival. None of it could find you before because your hands were full. One day, you will look back at what you thought was breaking you and realize it was sculpting you. You will thank the doors that closed. You will bless the relationships that faded. You will honor the habits that died quietly, because they were not losses. They were gifts disguised as absence. Life does not take from you. It takes for you. When the universe clears your path, trust the clearing, trust the space, trust the silence, trust the departure. Everything that leaves makes room for something aligned to arrive. And when it comes, you'll understand why nothing else could stay. 11. The sacred emptiness where new energy is poured in. There comes a moment on the journey when life feels like it is peeling you bare. Things you once depended on fall away. Plans dissolvent. Friendships fade. Your identity feels looser than your own clothing. And in that vulnerable space, you might look at your life and whisper, "Why does everything feel empty?" But emptiness is not a punishment. It is preparation. In quantum physics, empty space is not absence. It is possibility. It is the field of pure potential. Particles arise from emptiness. Waves collapse into form. Creation begins not in fullness, but in void. The universe seems to follow a simple rule. Nothing new can enter a space already crowded. We forget that, We cling to routines that no longer nourish us, relationships that no longer see us, beliefs that no longer fit. We fill every hour with noise, distraction, movement, as if stillness is dangerous. But sometimes life must empty you so thoroughly that you can finally feel yourself again. It removes the clutter, external and internal, not because you are unworthy, but because you are overfull of what can't go with you. At first, emptiness feels like loneliness. But loneliness is simply the absence of the noise you once used to avoid yourself. When the noise fades, you meet silence. And in that silence, you meet truth. Imagine a cup filled to the brim with yesterday's tea, stale, bitter, cold. If someone tries to pour in fresh tea, it spills everywhere. The cup is full, but its fullness is useless. To pour something new, you must first empty it. The same is true with your heart. The universe cannot fill what you refuse to release. When jobs collapse, relationships break, plans crumble, you are not being destroyed, you are being cleared. Your dreams need room to breathe. Your soul needs room to expand. And your life needs room for new frequency, new alignment, new resonance. There's a reason people who cling to the past struggle with the future. They are trying to hold new blessings with hands already gripping old burdens. Life has a gentle, sometimes painful way of opening your hands. Emptiness does something remarkable. It changes your sensitivity. When everything unnecessary is stripped away, you begin to feel what is real. You recognize which connections nourish instead of drain, which conversations feed instead of flatter, which environments expand rather than shrink you. Space sharpens intuition. It's within the hollowed-out moments that you hear whispers of your true calling, the voice that was always drowned by obligation, fear, or expectation. You might feel a strange desire to paint, write, move, travel, rest. These impulses are not random. They are breadcrumbs guiding you toward the next version of you. Creation does not rush. It unfolds. Sometimes your life will feel like a blank canvas. No lines, no instructions, just possibility. The ego hates this. It wants certainty. It wants answers. It wants shape. But the soul knows that possibility is richer than certainty. Certainty is a cage. Possibility is a sky. If you allow yourself to sit in the emptiness without forcing, without filling, it transforms. The first shift is emotional. You stop craving external validation. You start following inner peace. Your heart stops chasing and begins attracting. You realize silence is not void. It's fertile soil. The second shift is relational. People who resonate at your new vibration arrive effortlessly. They feel familiar, even if you just met. Conversations deepen. Boundaries soften your inner world, while strengthening your outer one. You stop confusing availability with love. The third shift is creative. Ideas arrive like flashes of lightning. Solutions appear without overthinking. You suddenly understand that clarity requires space. Innovation requires boredom. Insight requires pause. The fourth shift is spiritual. You stop begging the universe for signs. You start embodying alignment. You recognize that emptiness is one of the universe's most profound languages. It says, trust what is leaving, bless what is coming. Yet, emptiness is uncomfortable. The human instinct is to fill it with distraction, with noise, with people who do not deserve your proximity. But if you fill the void too quickly, you simply recreate the old patterns with new faces. This sacred emptiness is not something to endure. It is something to honor. Think of a house being renovated. The workers remove old walls, outdated wiring, peeling paint. Dust fills the air. The space looks worse before it becomes better. If you judge the process halfway through, you'd think everything was ruined. But if you let the process finish, you witness transformation. The soul works the same way. Life removes what cannot hold your new frequency. Old friendships fade because you are no longer bonded through wounds. Old desires dissolve because they were born from survival, not purpose. Old identities crumble because you no longer need them as protection. The emptiness you are left with is not hollow. It is room. Room for breath. Room for clarity. Room for new love. Room for new work. Room for joy you haven't met yet. When the cocoon is empty, wings appear. And here's the most beautiful secret. Everything you truly need will arrive when you are spacious enough to receive it. When you stop stuffing your life full of almosts and not quites, you create space for exactly. It's in emptiness that you will finally fall in love with solitude, not as loneliness, but as companionship with yourself. It's in emptiness that you realize presence is richer than performance. It's in emptiness that you learn boundaries, not as defense, but as devotion. And as new energy pours in, you become selective, not picky-wise. You stop settling for crumbs because you have tasted the meal of self-worth. You stop running after chaos because you have known the peace of stillness. Eventually, a subtle transition occurs. Your emptiness fills, not with clutter, but with clarity, not with distraction, de direction, not with everyone, but with the right ones. And one quiet morning, you will wake up with a spacious chest and think, I needed all of that emptied. You'll feel grateful for every ending, every loss, every departure. Without them, you would have remained cramped inside a story too small for your becoming. The universe does not subtract to punish. It subtracts to create space. Space for love that fits. Space for work that matters. Space for peace that lasts. Space for the next chapter of your soul's curriculum. Because the truth is simple. A full cup cannot be filled, but an open one can overflow. So when life clears you out, breathe. The pouring has only just begun. When you fall apart, you are becoming new. There is a season in every soul's journey when everything familiar begins to crumble. It feels like watching the home you once lived inside collapse, plank by plank. Walls that held your memories fall flat. Dust rises around you until you cough on the very history you once rested in. And in those disorienting moments, it's easy to believe you're being buried. Easy to assume that life has finally decided to cover you with the weight of everything you feared you could not carry. But if you sit long enough in that darkness, something quiet happens. You begin to recognize that you are not beneath a tomb. You are beneath soil. And soil is where things grow. The soul's old structure must be demolished so that its new shape can emerge. This collapse is not punishment. It's renovation. Down there in the dark, where no one sees, your roots begin to stretch. They weave through old beliefs, anchoring into deeper truths. You start absorbing lessons you never asked for, but now would never trade. You learn patience, because nothing sprouts overnight. You learn surrender, because struggle only tangles the roots. You learn silence, because the universe speaks softly. This part of your becoming is not meant to be seen. Real growth happens underground. And then, almost unnoticeably at first, you begin to rise, not like someone clawing their way out of despair, exhausted and desperate, but like a seed responding to light. With quiet certainty, with effortless alignment, you take your first steps into a world that feels familiar and foreign all at once. The air brushes against your new skin, and you realize how small your old life was. You do not return to who you were. You emerge as who you were always meant to become. You shine differently now, not brightly in a way that demands attention, but steadily in a way that draws people closer without words. People can feel your healing in your presence. They can sense your resilience in the calmness of your voice. They see wisdom in the stillness of your eyes. You don't have to prove anything anymore. You embody it. When you've walked through fire, you whisper truth without saying a thing. You communicate through frequency, through the energy you bring into a room, through the way you breathe before you speak, through the gentle pauses between your sentences. Your essence becomes noticeable even in silence, and in that silence, a realization dawns. The universe never set out to break you. It only dismantled the structures that were never you to begin with. All those cracked pieces on the ground, they are not debris. They are outdated armor, fragmented masks, old identities that protected you once but now only weighed you down. The pain was the crowbar that pried them loose. What remains after the dust settles is the true architecture of your soul, the shape of who you are beneath reputation, the blueprint of who you are without fear, the outline of who you are when belonging is no longer borrowed. When you rise from that rubble, you become more than a survivor. You become a signal, a lighthouse in the dark, quietly telling others, it's safe to shed. It's okay to change. You are not dying. You are breaking open. People will see their own reflection in your healing. Your resilience will give them permission to breathe deeper. They won't admire you because you're perfect. They'll trust you because you've been shattered and rebuilt with your own hands. You may think you're done at this point, but something gentle continues to shift inside you. Fear begins to fall silent. Doubt loses its vocabulary. Approval stops being oxygen. You stop negotiating your worth. And slowly, the world loses its ability to wound you in the same places. Not because you've grown harder, but because you've grown deeper. Your spirit becomes earthquake-proof from within. And then, one day, without ceremony or spotlight, you catch yourself smiling in the quiet, not because life is flawless, it never is, but because you recognize yourself in a way you never have before. You feel anchored, spacious, untouchable in the places that used to bleed. This is what rebirth feels like. Not fireworks, not grand declarations, just a steady, unwavering, knowing I am more whole because I once fell apart. Every scar becomes a stained glass window the light pours through. Every crack becomes an opening for compassion. Every loss becomes space for something truer to arrive. And when the world looks at you and wonders how you carry such peace, you'll answer, not with words, but presence. Because the truth is simple. We are not born to remain unbroken. We are born to fracture, to let the light in, and to become luminous through our wounds. In that quiet radiance, you finally understand. You were never buried. You were planted. And now you've grown into someone nothing can steal from the inside.